it says less than or equal to.
It doesn't say less than or equal to, it just says less than, so it must be over here, because it doesn't say less than or equal to. And this is 2.5. Remember that it says it up here, which you didn't understand because I didn't explain it, but either one of these can be the claim. The alternative or the null can be the claim. So this one is the claim. Kind of like innocent until proven guilty. Like, you can claim that somebody's innocent, you can claim that somebody's guilty. Okay, now there are two types of errors that can occur, and there's always one of these questions on this stupid thing. Okay. So type 1 error is when the null hypothesis is rejected incorrectly. And a type 2 error is when the null hypothesis is accepted incorrectly. And when I say incorrectly, I don't mean like you did your math wrong. I mean like you got a weird sample. So like if I said, the average number of broken bones that people have is less than 3 in their lifetime. And then we went and interviewed 20 people and they all had over 10. That's unusual. And then then I would say about my hypothesis, I would say, look, I'm wrong. Because I interviewed these 20 people, they're all way higher than my prediction, I'm wrong. And then the answer is, no, I wasn't wrong. If I had gotten a bigger sample, I may have proven myself right. I just got a bad sample. So it's when you get a type 1 error, which is actually how marijuana testing works, which is why we're going to talk about that next. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to draw like a box that looks like this. Like that. I'm going to draw one up here and one down here. Okay, so over here we've got the truth. And over here is the decision. And all we think about, which is very frustrating, because you would think it would be like you're testing whether your hypothesis is true, but it's just testing if the null is true. Okay, so the truth is, like, deep down, H sub O is true, or H sub O is false. And over here, with the decision, we're accepting it or rejecting it. Ooh, I'm kind of switching these two, so I'm just going to draw arrow here.
So I can just write down the bottom one then?
Yeah, I'm going to do the marijuana one on the bottom by accident, so.
Okay.
All right, so you are a drug user. or not a drug user. And here you test positive. Here you test negative. Okay, so let's ignore how everybody feels about drugs in this room, whether or not you think that smoking marijuana is fine or not. It doesn't matter. The point of this is that these people want to make a drug test that accurately tests whether you have marijuana in your system. Like, imagine that you're coming from the perspective of them, okay? You're making a test, and you want it to work. So what do you want to have happen? If someone's a drug user, what do you want the test to say? Positive. This is good. That's good. We want, if somebody's a drug user, the test should test positive. And if somebody's not a drug user, it should test negative. This means the test is working. Okay? This one is a type 1 error. I think this is easiest to understand with drug testing. That means that you use drugs, but you still tested negative for them. And a type 2 error is not being a drug user, but testing positive anyway. This one is called a false positive. You heard of this before? False positive, and this one is a false negative. And it's the exact same thing with hypothesis testing. This is a type 1 error. And this is a type 2 error. Okay, so in specifically marijuana testing, which one is the worst error?
Type 1.
Let's see, that they were a drug user and they tested negative.
False positive. It depends. It depends on what they're testing for.
Okay, so that's a great question, right? Okay, so normally a type 1 error is considered to be the worst. And the reason why is because who are they selling the drug test to?
Probably like a company.
The company who's testing for drugs,
Right.
right? So like, let's suppose that I was being drug tested to see if I get a job here, okay? And I end up with a false negative, as in I don't do drugs. Wait, no, a false negative means that I do drugs, but that I tested negative. That would be bad for the school, and the school's the one that paid for the test. They don't want somebody who uses drugs working here, which means that this is bad for the school in that case. This one's bad for me, but I'm not the client. Do you see what I mean? So most companies focus on lowering the type 1 error as far as they can, and that's not because of any kind of judgment calls about whether drugs are good or bad. It's about who's buying their product and what the person buying their product wants, which is to make sure they're not getting false positives.
There's another thing with that, where in a lot of states, if you take a drug test and you get a false positive, you can demand without any question to take another test. And they have to
It's all tests, every drug test, every state.
Oh, really?
Highly recommend it. So if you ever, because this, I think the rate of false negatives in drug testing is like 1%, and the number of false positives is something like 8%. Like you could be testing positive without doing drugs at all. So if you do drugs and you end up with a positive, well, that's that. But if you don't do drugs and you end up with a positive, definitely ask for another test, because the chances that 2 tests will go wrong in a row would be 8% times 8%, which is what?
6.4%.
0.64%, which means that less than 1%. So you go from an 8% chance that it messes up to less than 1% chance it messes up. So definitely worth it, unless it's a bad batch. Then that's a,
Combinatorics thing.
no, if it's a bad batch, that's a, what was it called?